Ladies and gentlemen, Sapoops, friends from all over the world, today we have a very interesting guest on this podcast, and that is the one, the only critical spectator who apparently is a real human being.
Yes, I am.
You are indeed a
Uh,
real human being, and our conversation today is titled Malaypartheid and Meritocracy. Why are we talking about Malaypartheid? Well, you have this right here.
yeah,
Wow.
the infamous post.
The infamous post, bro. I mean, like, there were literally, yeah, like, you guys can see this for yourself at this point. And, my man, like, you stirred so much shit. Like, it was fascinating. Like, the thousands of reactions, the
Yep.
angry people, the triggering and everything, bro. I mean, like, wow. Like, how's it in for you? I mean, like, do you get any, like, death
Oh,
threats?
it's not the first. It's not my first rodeo.
Not your first rodeo?
So I wasn't really that surprised given my past experiences with sort of Malaysian topics, which
Mm-hmm.
I occasionally post on the blog. Funny enough, actually, my blog erupted in 2018 when I posted about Mahathir.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually the blog was started several years before, but really got popular in Singapore
Mm-hmm.
after the 2018 tensions between Singapore and Malaysia and
Mm-hmm.
Mahathir doing his usual stuff, and that's when it got popular, especially in Singapore. So it was Malaysian topics that got me there. And occasionally I still post about it, obviously about something, whatever piques my interest. And in this case, with the war in Iran right now, and
Mm-hmm.
Malaysian reactions to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it started with one post, and then it progressed to other posts, and then here we are. So I'm
You're
always my talent is triggering people, especially when sharing some uncomfortable realities in a way that is probably the thing about Malaysia and Singapore, both of them, is that
mm-hmm.
speech is a little bit restricted on both sides, and I feel that the locals don't really have.
Mm-hmm.
They don't they're a little bit afraid to be that controversial, that sort of in the face.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and well, in Singapore, the difference perhaps between both of them is that in Singapore it applies to everybody. So no matter which way you hit, whether it's Chinese against Malays, whether it's Malays against Chinese, whether it's Indians and whites, and everybody's treated sort of equally. But with Malaysia, it's because of what I wrote, it's usually tends to be slanted towards in favor of the majority,
Oh yeah.
and I consider it unfair, especially I normally don't write about Malaysia, but I don't write about many places. But what really gets me is when I see some preaching or some virtue signaling or some grandstanding, and then I think, wait a second, aren't you doing something similar? You know. So in this case, the trigger, was Anwar's honoring of Khamenei and the minute of silence in the parliament, and I thought, okay, I'm going to write about that. This is even Indonesia, Prabowo is under a little bit of pressure for his sort of not very direct stance in the conflict, but he's a reasonable man. And in Malaysia, the politicians are just like, yeah, let's honor the regime that
Mm.
killed tens of thousands of people. I'm thinking, how's that possible? So that was the first post that triggered reactions, and then
Oh, for
when
sure.
reactions come in, then I react to the reactions. And when I see, yeah, you know how it is. And when
Shall
I see
we
again, when I see
check out some of your
grants,
work at the moment? I mean, like, it's always good to have like some examples on hand. So then,
yeah,
some of the posts that you've made recently are some of these right over here.
yeah, a few of them
So,
now.
yep,
Uh,
that's right. This is the point at which they said, hey, sorry, you
Yeah,
are
you can.
promoting dangerous organizations and individuals.
Oh
Then,
yeah, yeah.
well, you appealed and then that was restored. And then it just went on and on until this recent post that got removed. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. But now, then you
Yep.
have this. Yeah, it's very much not
Yeah,
something that
I'm not stopping, huh?
you're not stopping. Yeah, no, like you're going on warpath, dude. Now, here's an interesting question, right? Now,
Yep.
I can imagine that the reaction from a whole bunch of people might be all like, who the do you think you are? You.
Yeah.
And by the way, like I'm sure a lot of people like they think to themselves, like this is a Singapore-based
Base
page
website
right here, but then they're
page.
wrong because you're not based in
Yep.
Singapore.
Oh,
Then
really? No.
they discover that like you are Polish, and then immediately then the narrative changes. Then they're like, "Who do you think you are? You think you know about my society? What the helly is
Yep.
this nonsense?" Foreigner talking about my country. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you? I mean, like, we're not gonna go like Greta Thunberg right there, but I tried to kind of like replicate
Yep.
that energy as much as I could. But yeah, so like tell me about yourself. Why should people listen to you, critical spectator? And like, do you have any experience of our societies to the point that you'd be able to say anything about
Yep.
Malaysia and Singapore? I don't know. I
Well,
mean, like we
yeah.
know that
Well,
you're a Singapore fanboy, but like, it's yeah.
yeah, I'm a Singapore fanboy, and yeah, ironically, the first country I came to in Southeast Asia was Malaysia. It was I came to Malaysia for work for a
Hmm.
few years back in 2010.
Wow.
So I spent a few years in Malaysia, not continuously. So because I'm from Poland, I have family in Poland, and I go back and visit, but sort of on and off for about well, fixed for about 2 years, and then on and off about 5 years until about 2015. So I would spend a few months at least in Malaysia each year.
Mhm.
I think the last time I came to Malaysia was just before the pandemic,
Wow.
and I spent a month. Usually, I would spend some time in Malaysia because, well, it's a little bit cheaper, and I know KL, and I have a few friends there. I even had a swimming coach. Yeah,
Whoa.
so it's funny because I didn't learn to swim when I was a kid, and I then
Uh-huh.
picked it up when I was like 30 in Malaysia, and then I had my coach. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to visit the guy to train with him a little bit more. So it's a little bit bizarre that way. But through
Uh-huh.
Malaysia, of course, I discovered Singapore, and then I fell in love with Singapore. The first visit, the first visit in 2010 when we went with my friends on the train that was still going to Tanjung Pagar, and it
Mhm.
took 10 hours to get from KL. Yeah. It's a story in itself, but that
Wow.
was, and then I disembarked in Singapore, and everything made sense. So it's such a nice, clean, developed, organized city. So that's how it
Wow.
started. And then I spent time in Singapore as well. A few years in Singapore later on, again on and off basis. From I think was it 2018 to 2020, just the pandemic.
Mm.
And then before that, I would visit Singapore a number of times each year as well. So actually, no,
Wow.
wait.
Mhm.
Sorry, no, not 2018. I'm wrong. It was 2016. 2016 to 2020. I would spend about half the year in Singapore and then half the year outside.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
So that
fascinating.
was that.
I mean, like,
Yep.
you discovered Singapore through Malaysia. And like before that,
Yeah.
like you had just like had no experience of
Nope.
Singapore. And then you went there and then like you just started like learning about the society, I guess. And then
Yeah.
wow. I mean, like it's quite fascinating to like think about, but what is it that enduringly like fascinates you about Singapore? I mean, I know that like you have this post right here which talks about how
Yeah.
well you enjoy writing about Singapore. You think that
Mm.
it's really, really cool and you care about this particular place. Without a Singapore in this world, you are homeless. So then,
Yeah.
I mean, why is it that like you've managed to maintain this sort of like enduring fascination with Singapore and like even now, like with the whole
Mm.
new government, like, do you feel that that's something that will be something that you can maintain for the foreseeable future?
It's very, very simple, really. We have 200 countries in the world, but
Hmm.
only very few make any sense, and Singapore is one of them. And the only other country that I could think of is these days, and after a long period of development, it would be UAE, where
Hmm.
I also spend these days. I spend about half the time in Dubai myself.
Hmm.
You caught me outside of it, so I don't have rockets flying overhead or missiles or drones.
Right.
But it's very simple. Singapore is the only country that makes sense,
Hmm.
and Dubai makes sense in a way as well. Everything else, actually, a good example is what happened to my posts, which were removed. They created a stir in Malaysia. They got a lot of hate in Malaysia, but it was Meta who
Hmm.
removed it.
Right.
So we're talking about an American company removing posts by a Polish guy in Europe. It is about Malaysia, but who cares? They are enforcing these strict anti-free speech rules, and it's the same everywhere you go these days. You go
Hmm.
to any country in Europe, almost probably. Ironically, the Eastern European countries, like where I'm, Poland and the rest, they're probably a bit more relaxed about speech still. Well, all the political correctness in the West is keeping you censored. In the US, even though speech is protected, you can be canceled, and all the big tech companies
Oh
are
yeah.
from there, and they keep canceling you for saying wrong things. And then you go to places like Malaysia, and I don't even want to mention poor or less developed countries where it's even more difficult. So we're losing that freedom to speak your mind everywhere else,
Hmm.
and we get nothing in return because the world is a mess. So you have high taxation, terrible bureaucracy, you have lots of crime everywhere you go. We're talking about developed world.
Hmm.
So Singapore, by comparison, is like everything makes sense. The government runs the country well. It's the taxes are low, and taxes are low because the government has used and invested the reserves over decades, and now 20% of the budget comes from actual return on
Return.
investment.
Hmm.
It's crime free, it's green, it's clean, food's good. Weather,
Hmm.
I love the weather, so that's a big plus for me.
Hmm.
I like the hot and humid, so
Hmm.
no problem there. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. You
Hmm.
cannot, walk. You cannot take a walk at night freely without looking, over your shoulder anywhere in the West these days. Why wouldn't I rave about Singapore? So any complaints about Singapore just get me like, well, people, you don't know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
Just travel out, spend a year or two abroad in the developed West, and see how
Hmm.
that compares to Singapore. So it's a no-brainer. It's easy. It's
Hmm.
easy. I don't know why anybody wouldn't like at least
Wow.
Singapore.
You pay such an honoring homage to the legacy of Papa Lee Kuan Yew and to, well, Papa Rajaratnam,
Yeah.
who incidentally came from Malaysia. We lost him,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And also to Goh Keng Swee. There's actually a tale in the book that I gave to you about how Goh Keng Swee was actually related by blood to our former finance minister in Malaysia, well,
Mm.
Tun Tan Siew Sin, and there's a whole bit of a kerfuffle there, but lots of
I think
jealousy. Do
I
you
think
remember
I
that
think
story?
Rajaratnam. It was Rajaratnam who said that really being Singaporean is a matter of conviction. So
Mm-hmm.
so really, it's you have to agree. If you have the mindset and you sort of agree or understand what the country is about, you
Mm-hmm.
can be Singaporean no matter where you're born,
Mm-hmm.
and no matter where you behave from. So
Wow.
and I think the fundamentally this was the core difference that led to separation as well,
Mm-hmm.
where Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, and the PAP, they wanted to build a Malaysian Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's equal, no matter where you're from, no matter your ancestry. We are here for a common purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas UMNO and the Malay sort of elite really wanted to build something like a Malay state,
Mm-hmm.
which by the way isn't necessarily bad. I mean, I don't have a problem with the, for example, with when talking about the controversial posts here. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a problem with enshrining Malays as people of the land, and this is our country. So
Mm-hmm.
Israel does it as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Israel has minorities, but it labels itself a Jewish state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're, we have, they explicitly say we have Arabs, we have others, but this is a Jewish state. Now, this stems from their history and the fact that they wanted to build their own safe place after hundreds of years of persecution and
Mm-hmm.
being chased away from different countries.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for Malaysia just to emphasize it, and even Singapore does it in a way where it has, enshrines the Malay as the national language.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gesture.
Right.
It doesn't have to come
Mm-hmm.
with any sort of legal preferences. So I don't have a problem with that. But it
Well,
becomes a problem
mm,
when, and this was the reason for the separation. It becomes a problem where one group really wants to rule over the others,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
this is, I think, detrimental to the whole country, to all the groups involved, including the
Yeah.
majority.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say, actually, like if we talk about it like legally, I mean, like Article 152 of the Singaporean Constitution, it does specifically say that the government shall exercise its functions in such manner as to recognize the
Yeah,
special position of the Malays. And like what you're saying, like it just really rings true, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And they do protect the Malays in a whole range of different ways as well. But so now, going back a little bit, right, to what you have right here, which made you persona non grata in Malaysia. I don't know if you're going to be coming back anytime soon.
No, I don't think for a few years at least.
Not for a few
We'll have to
years.
see how,
We'll see.
if the
We'll see.
country changes at all. But I spent so much time in Malaysia that I don't really
Wow.
feel the need. So I guess that's part of the reason I feel so free
Mhm.
to ride these things, because
Yeah.
well, there's nothing that
I mean,
there are no consequences
for
that I
what
can
it's worth,
face
you know,
unless I
like,
visit, and
yeah,
there could be some, as we know,
there could be.
but
But
that's really what's annoying me, and it's funny because I've never been a free speech absolutist, but I do feel like if you have the rules, these rules should apply always.
mhm,
You don't create a privileged group that is immune from criticism, and then everybody else gets the short end of the stick. This is
right.
what really winds me up. And what, when it winds me up, then I'm gonna write about it.
Right. So then let's have a look at the text of what you wrote
Yeah.
right here. So like that was something that we are missing out in the current status quo, so to speak, of
Yeah.
your Facebook post. You said between sobbing
Um,
their eyes out for Palestinian terrorists and the murderous Iranian regime, many Malaysian Muslims like to come here to try to convince all of us of their completely imaginary moral superiority. In reality, they are some of the most ignorant, brainwashed, and fundamentally bigoted people, as we know from their anti-Semitic rants. But
yep.
their bigotry is not limited to Jews, of course, whom they like to blame for all the ills of civilization. In reality, it's Malaysia that's a modern model for legal apartheid, institutionalized racism. Now, a question for you, right? So then, how do you go from this right here towards making a post
Yeah.
like that? Like, what's going through your mind? Walk me through what Michael Petraeus is thinking about as this is kind of happening along the way.
Well, it's just, I write one post and then there's a flood of reactions from Malaysian
I
Muslims,
see.
Malays, and then it reminds me of all the other things that they are responsible for.
Mhm.
So I just point out. I don't like hypocrisy. We can
Mhm.
disagree on some things, but if you're trying to portray yourself as some virtuous individual, but we know that you're doing all these bad things, then I'm going to point it out.
Mhm.
I know, it may seem harsh, but But the fact is that they come to the page and lament the fate of Palestinians, and how
Mm-hmm.
the world should rally and help them. And then they say, well, Jews don't really exist and Israel should be destroyed. And by the way, if the Chinese and Indians don't like it in Malaysia, they can just get lost and go back to their own countries. And then you're thinking, wait a second, why are they allowed to say all of these things and nothing ever happens to them? I'm going to write something in response. I'm going to make that hypocrisy hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So I do.
Fair point. And that's where this post came from. And yeah,
Oh
this is
yeah,
what you
that's
said.
another one basically. Yeah.
That is what you said. You said you are love Malaysian Malays. They come here and claim you're lying about us. We're very tolerant. And well, I think that a lot of people would have seen like comments that look like this right here, which I'm not going to
Indeed.
affirm or perhaps deny the truth of at this particular point. But I do want to kind of, well, put on a bit of a
Yep.
challenge right here in order to mitigate against the risk that I'll be called out for saying, oh, like platforming this particular racist, this horrible human being who
Yeah,
knows
yeah.
nothing about Malaysia. So then
Mm.
the words that you used were, shall we say, quite direct and pointed. And they
Yep.
created, so to speak, a comparison between this country, or what some people would say is not a country, and
Well,
Malaysia.
that's
And
yep.
it may interest you to know that there was another incident that actually happened sometime last year that had the same sort of explosive effect. Basically, a certain Akmal Saleh, he is a UMNO politician and he is the UMNO youth chief. So basically, one of the things
Yep.
that happened last year was that there was this protest against flags being hung upside down.
Isu bendera ini bukan isu yang kecil. Isu bendera ini bukan isu yang nak dibuat dibesar.
Basically, what happened was that this very unfortunate character right here, he hung the flag upside down, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I
You remember
remember
this?
that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I
So
mean, I
that
remember seeing that. Yeah.
you remember seeing that. Okay, great. So then this basically just started off a whole
Yep.
full-on outrage from many members of our community who insisted on protecting the sanctity of the Malaysian flag and promptly, as their optimal response, started associating turning flags upside down with Malaysian Chinese people.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that there was a sort of like Israel comparison right there is that,
Yeah.
well, this man representing Lawyers for Liberty named
Oh
Zaid
yeah, yeah.
Malik. So, like, he had a confrontation with Akmal Saleh. Zaid Malik and Lawyers for Liberty basically compare the actions of Akmal Saleh and his gang, right, to the
Mm.
actions of Zionists. The moment people like just start comparing Malaysia and Israel anyway, then like people just like flip.
Well,
But
that's. I mean, it's no surprise, especially if you don't think the country even exists or should exist.
Mhm.
And well, it's just another expression of the bigotry I was I've written about. Um, so that's just a common label in a Muslim majority country, especially one that is ironically far from the Middle East,
Mhm.
because the Middle East is growing comfortable with Israel, but it kind of seems that the further you go away from the
Mhm.
actual source of the problems, the region, the higher the passions of the people.
Mhm.
Um, so obviously the comparison with Israel must have riled them up. But the truth is, all of this is factually accurate.
Mhm.
Israel calls itself a Jewish nation, but there's no legal discrimination for its citizens, its minority citizens, and these minorities, by the way, are comparable in size to Malaysian minorities. I mean, minorities in Malaysia about what 30%, and it's 20 something, 23, 4% in Israel, and given the history, we're talking not only because Malaysia doesn't really have a violent history between minorities. There's some resentment, there is jealousy, envy, but you know the word, you know, you had a few racial riots and clashes, but these happen in many different countries. But you
Mm-hmm.
don't have an outright war.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have Arabs fighting the Jews like you had in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot, there will be a lot of reasons
Mm-hmm.
for Jews to openly discriminate against local Arabs, to try to push them out,
Mm-hmm.
to try to, you know, make them go away. By the way, as Arab countries did to Jews around, you know, the 1940s, when Israel was founded, and then suddenly Jews in Arab countries were persecuted at a higher rate, and they were forced to leave, and many fled to Israel. But nothing of the sort really happened in Israel, apart from the period of actual war.
Mm-hmm.
But Israel is not, it's saying, yeah, we're all part of the one country, and everybody's treated equally. Everybody has equal rights. Everybody has equal obligations as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you compare it to Malaysia, and you get a lot of fixed quotas. You have preferences. You know, you have corporate ownership. There has to be a certain level of boomy before you can score a contract, before you can do an IPO or whatever. You have quotas for housing, and you know, I understand that statistically the minorities on average are doing better than Malays. And you know, among the richest people in Malaysia, you have the list is full of Chinese names, but these billionaires do not really represent all of the Chinese people and all of the Indians. And but nobody cares about the poor minorities. They just don't think they don't exist.
All right.
Which I believe is unfair and doesn't belong in the 21st century.
Fair. Now, while that's true, I want to get your thoughts here on the wording that you chose right here. Now, to what extent do you think it's a fair comparison to call what we have in Malaysia apartheid? Now, if we look at the historical context, which may be interesting to think about, so then when Malaysia was formed, it was as part of a colonial project. The Indians and the Chinese came into Malaysia. And later on, through the deliberations of the main communities with Tan Cheng Lock, and you also had VT Sambantan and Tunku Abdul Rahman as well, thus the country was formed in a situation where the different groups were very much, shall we say, unequal along the way. So then, like, when people see like Malaypartheid right here, so then number one, they might think that the wording is not fair because the lived reality on the ground, it doesn't represent a situation where people are intentionally kept apart, as in like in KL, for example, and you may have seen this when people kind of like go around, like we do talk to like Malay friends, we speak Malay, we hang out with people who happen to be Malay. And then on another level, right? So then you also see that these things right here, whether you might think that these are like unfair, like forms of discrimination or not. So then like there's a sort of like plausible deniability that that's intentionally meant to exclude people. Education, there are lots of poor Malays, so to speak. Of course, there are like lots of poor Chinese and Indian people as well, but then that's part of the thing. Civil service, this one is slightly less defensible, so I want to hear your thoughts on that a little bit later on. Reserve land, so then historically there were a lot of pieces of land that were owned by Malays that were just like sold off, and then eventually then the land ownership, then that ended up decreasing for the Malay community as a whole. Whether or not they were willing transactions or not, that's a separate matter. Public procurement, well, housing, construction quotas, well, that's something that you could, well, say it goes over to like, say, rich Malays. But hey, like some people might
There's
say, at
a whole
least
story
we tried
there.
to do something. We tried to do something. Corporate ownership, I mean, like we could, I guess, like go over to like that one article Bumi companies, 1 out of 99. I believe that was an article, 97 actually. Only one Bumi Putra company out of 97 firms were listed in the KLSE in the 3 years leading up to 2024. And then if we go over to business financing, so then they might then argue that, hey, like it is a fact that the Malay community is poorer. It's more unfortunate, even though like some people just choose to kind of like say, do you know that we are actually the greatest? Do you know what will happen if you just don't rely on us to buy your products and stuff like that right there? So all in all, like for all of the different reasons and the specific possible critiques that I offered right here, so like
Yeah.
to what extent do you feel that apartheid is an accurate way to describe like what's going on here?
Well, the word is used here deliberately because the word apartheid is so often used against Israel by Malays themselves or by Muslims in general around the world, and even some Western left-wingers, which is quite weird because, of course, they say Israel is practicing apartheid against Palestinians. But Palestinians are not residents of Israel, and they're not the citizens of Israel. Many of them rejected residence in Israel after the 67, after the war of the 67. And then Israel left Gaza unilaterally 20 years ago and left Palestinians to self-governance. So Palestinians are left to live on their own terms, really. And but within Israel, and for all residents, as I said, of all different ethnicities, everybody's treated equally. There are no divisions. There's no separation, legally or otherwise, right?
Mhm.
And yet, the word apartheid is being used against, leveled against the Jews and Israel. So really, of course, we cannot compare it to what went on in South Africa during the colonial times, where you have physical segregations and you have the Bantustans and all the other things, and then the disenfranchisement of the black population and whatnot. However, the term apartheid is really just an umbrella term for all sorts of legal discrimination on the basis of race.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have plenty of cases of that in Malaysia. You say people are not separated. Yes, they're not physically separated in let's say housing. There are no Bumi blocks and there are no Chinese blocks, and nobody's forcing walls between them or whatnot. But let's look at education. You have a big wall put up for non-Bumi applicants. They have a tougher path to go in. Bumis are consistently getting higher grades with lower effort through the matriculasi system. That grants them over, in practice, it grants them over 80% of the seats in local universities. So that, I think, is a pretty big wall separating the privileged, the legally privileged majority and the minorities. And if you look at housing and other policies, you mentioned yourself civil service employment, right? I think that's a big wall saying no, we don't want Chinese, we don't want Indians, we want more people, Bahasa native speakers, Bumis or whatever. And then
tentatively, I mean, like, might
yeah.
I like mention, I guess, like when you think about like the matriculation thing, I feel like there's a sort of like plausible deniability there in the sense that like, people could say that like, hey, like these people got into matriculation because they are smart. If
Yeah.
you were not smart, then that's why you didn't get into matriculation. That's why. So like, why are you out there complaining? Because like you were just like not smart enough. And then the second point would be like on like the civil service thing. So like we know that in order for you to get a job, you have to apply in the first place. So then a person might then say, hey, like all these people are not applying for jobs. So then there's no discrimination. How you respond to those possible critiques?
Well, but we know that the easy matriculation, the single year matriculation stream is pretty much reserved for Bumis, a 90 to 10. The thing is really that a system of outright quotas in universities was replaced with this, what you call plausible deniability, where they can say, oh, universities only accept people on the basis of merit,
That is what they say.
But then they created the parallel system that leads up to you applying for the university that already disqualifies most minority candidates before they even reach the application stage. So it's already there. They can just say for show that it's not there, but it's there. Actually, I was looking at an article from 3 years ago when Anwar was questioned about it by some Indian student, and this is so entrenched that people are actually still talking about university quotas as if they are a thing, including Anwar. He said, "Oh yeah, university quotas are going to stay there because if we remove them, we're going to lose the election, and pass is going to come, and it's going to get even worse for you than it is now." So implicitly, everybody already knows, including the prime minister, that really there are quotas for universities. We just don't call it that way anymore.
Yeah.
So it's fake, but there's a big wall separating the two groups, the majority and the minority, and the minorities have to climb over this wall at great expense and effort. Or most of them probably, well, that's how I would assume, just take the easy way out and just leave the country, just go study abroad, which isn't bad in a way. It's probably studying in the UK or in in the US is always better than studying in Malaysia itself. But then you're pushing these people out anyway, because how many of them are going to return and contribute to the economy?
That's true.
So it's ultimately bad for everybody, because if you push the minorities out, the talented ones who could have come back and built companies and employ locals in increasingly better jobs, these jobs are now going to locals, Malays and non-Malays. They could have built them, but they don't. So they leave, and it hurts everybody. So
yeah,
it's a self-defeating a sense of set of policies that really serves to just emphasize that, well, Malays are privileged because it's our country, and that's all that matters, even if it hurts them in the end.
Yeah, and in fact, the Mahathir that you criticize and that eventually rose you to a point of fame or infamy, or maybe a little bit of both, shall we say? I mean, like, he talked a little bit about that idea of like a Malay dilemma, like, should, for example, the Malays let essentially the other people in their country go out there and move things forward, and at the same time, well, lose control over their country, or should they arrogate for themselves like a stronger role? And like, note that I'm not saying anything about the present situation, but this is just what Mahathir said, right? Should the Malays arrogate a stronger role for themselves, and in so doing, well, end up slowing down the country? And I'm actually going to show you also like two additional things right over here. Sure. And the first thing is related to the point that you raised about brain drain and the impact on the body politic. Did you know that Stanford University, and this is a Stanford University page, Stanford University maintains a page about the brain drain problem in Malaysia, because apparently it is that freaking bad. And you can see right over there, you have a lot of people actually going over to Singapore, amongst other things. And the next thing that I want to draw in on is related to the point that you were talking about in relation to Anwar getting criticized. And it was this girl. And here's a fun fact for you. Do you see this publication right here? Do you know about this publication, or like what's special about it?
Not really, no.
You don't know? Okay, great. So, fun fact for you, but Malaysia now is actually banned in Singapore.
Okay.
It is actually banned in Singapore.
POFMAD.
It was POFMAD, yeah. And you haven't gotten POFMAD before, have you?
No.
You've never been POFMAD?
I always write the truth, so they kind of, there's no reason.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know about Singapore, like to such a large extent, which could be like a sizable number of you out there, there is an infamous law in Singapore that is known as POFMA. It is the brainchild of the Singapore
Yep.
Minister K. Shanmugam. It is basically this right here. It's a kind of an interesting law, by the way. It offers like correction directions, and they can be issued if a false statement of fact has been or is being communicated in Singapore through the internet. Now, what you said about truth, like it makes a lot of sense right there. But an interesting observation that was provided by the historian PJ Thum, I'm not sure what you think about him, but like that could be a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But he observed, right, that being communicated in Singapore can mean that, well, something is accessible in Singapore, meaning that if
Yep.
anybody like were to make a Facebook post, like even if they were in, let's say, I don't know, like Russia using a VPN or something, as long as somebody from
Yes.
Singapore can access it, well, then that means it's being communicated in Singapore. So then when we think a little bit about the situation that you have been placed in because of the removal of the post from
Yes.
Meta platforms, which you
Mhm.
politely noted as that cancerous organization. And there were a couple more other things, but I don't want to get demonetized. But
Yeah.
so when you think about that right there, so then you have a scenario or a situation where Malaysia did not remove your post. Or at least, well, it wasn't the Malaysian government or it was not like MCMC. To the
Probably.
extent that we
Yeah.
know, it could have been, but like we don't really have evidence to say that that is the case right there.
Yes.
And on the other hand, then you have the Singapore government with the POFMA and the whole range of other things out there, which people say is used to silence dissent, to quieten critics, to ensure that
Mm.
anything that does not pass the keen filter of MDDI will not pass. So when you think about that situation, do you feel that
I'm
like
a big fan.
Malaysia has more? You're a big fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of POFMA. Yeah, I
You're a
think it's
big
one of
fan
the
of
best.
POFMA. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because I was gonna ask you then. So like from your experience with Singapore and Malaysia, I
Yep.
guess. So you were not regulated in Malaysia in this particular instance, but do you think that maybe you would have more freedom of speech? And not necessarily you, right? But like, any random person out there, like who were to just casually be using the internet and trying to like disseminate their views right there. So from your experience, do you think that the free speech environment is better in Malaysia or in Singapore?
No, I wouldn't say. Well, and I wouldn't say it's better in Malaysia at all, and especially since if I were in Malaysia right now, I would be under a serious threat of getting a knock on the door from the police. The sheer fact that was Meta who removed the post, although the second removal of the post was a little suspicious, but it doesn't mean that there was no involvement from the authorities or from anybody who is sort of close to them. Because sometimes it might be easier to unleash an army of bots or users to report a particular post, to have it taken down,
Mm-hmm.
and not get the government involved. There's
Right.
no reason, because it's what you mentioned in your video. It's the Streisand effect. The moment the government gets explicitly involved, it begins drawing attention, and you cannot really suppress anything online. You cannot stop people from sharing it on WhatsApp. You can't stop them from sharing it on email. You could technically block a blog, but there are VPNs. So the moment that the government has to really have a good reason to step in. And it's easier just to mass report an account or a post to have it taken down. And in Singapore, and what I like about Singapore as well, and POFMA actually encapsulates why I like Singapore so much, because Singapore sets the rules very straight without explicitly banning you from publication unless you do not comply with the rules. Because you have to remember that the correction notice doesn't really mean that the content has to be removed. Occasionally, they will issue content removal requests when they believe it could be dangerous for whatever reason, security or whatnot. It might be, inflaming, it might be calling for violence or whatever. But the government actually, the way POFMA is used is not to use, is not, is a little bit like you know what it is? It's a government sanctioned community note. It's what you have on X. It's basically a little box underneath or above or whatever saying, no, we found that this post is misleading because A, B, C, D, and the publisher has to carry this notice with their content. And this is what it is. It's the community note sanctioned by law. It's not censorship. And this is what gets me about other social media platforms, including Facebook. They take it down because somebody thought something, and you have no real way of appeal. You have no, you could go to court, but who's going to go to court? Even in Europe, you have sort of this dispute settlement bodies, but it's also a bureaucratic process. Am I going to go through it to get a post back up? Oh God, please spare me this. So you have outright censorship that has huge obstacles to get reversed. Whereas in Singapore, it's basically the government saying, on this particular and important issue, because POFMA only applies to important things that the government thinks, well, it could seriously mislead people. It could alter the way the country is perceived, or it could stir hatred, or it could basically cheat people out of something. For whatever reason, if it's a big problem, the government is going to step in and clarify it, not censor it, unless you insist on keeping it public. When the government clearly stated and explained, because that's the crucial point. The government explains why it's incorrect. It explains why it's false. It doesn't just say, oh, this is all wrong, take it down. No, that's not how it works. So the government still actually has to provide some evidence to why it's not right. And so when you really get yourself on the end of POFMA and then to get yourself blocked from Singapore, you really have to stick to your guns. And also, by the way, if it applies to big companies, to news outlets or whatever, these companies have the resources and the lawyers. They can always go to court. The government explicitly allowed appeals through a system that is independent of the government. So you don't appeal to them. You don't have to appeal to the ministries. You can, but then you can go through court, and the court impartially is going to establish whether you were right or not. You can challenge the government. So that's why I like it. The rules are simple, clear. You're not it doesn't disappear. The content doesn't disappear. It's not censorship. It's the government telling you why this is wrong. And then if you disagree, you can follow the avenue and then you get a court verdict if you really want to.
I see. Okay.
But if I did this in Malaysia, I would have a knock on the door, and then I would have thousands of people calling for my imprisonment, and God knows how long it's going to take. Then judging by the past cases, I would probably be dragged through court, and then months and months later, even if not jailed, then I would be fined, and I would have to be forced to apologize for telling what I told, which is really factually the truth. So I don't think Malaysia has more freedom of speech compared to Singapore. I think Singapore, while not as free as the ideal countries in the West, it's actually freer than most others, and especially Malaysia. When you compare the cross-border rules, but this is down to what Singapore is really good about: making laws very logical and very clear.
Wow.
And actually, you know what? I'm going to take one thing back. I don't think Singapore is worse than Western countries. I think it might be more restrictive than an idealized Western model. But I think in practice, Singapore is actually more free when it comes to expression.
Wow.
The reason being, you might not have the laws, although you do increasingly have the laws in the West, the hate speech laws, which are basically just very murky and uncertain. Anything that can, we're heading in the West in this direction, especially in Europe, where anything that can be considered offensive by anybody else automatically makes you guilty, even if it's not, even if it's true.
Mm,
Whereas and there's also the whole problem with cancel culture, where really you have private companies and you have private individuals ganging up on you to punish you outside of the laws themselves, for writing something that they didn't like. So I think in that regard, Singapore is a lot better, because it's difficult. It's difficult to be cancelled in Singapore. It's difficult to get cancelled.
mm,
And the laws have restrictions.
mhm,
You cannot be openly provocative in a way that you would explicitly call for violence against other
mm,
groups, or explicitly say these groups are worse for whatever reason than these groups or whatnot. But first of all, these rules apply in all directions. So there's nobody is privileged on the basis of race. The government simply said, just don't talk rubbish, and you won't get into trouble on these
mm,
particular topics.
mm,
And once you avoid this, then you can say whatever you want, which
mm.
is much better, I think, that it is in the West. I've never run into problems with in Singapore, but I've run into many problems with American companies like Meta. So what does that tell you? Yeah.
Okay, okay. Fascinating, fascinating. For what it's worth, I guess the statement that Singapore is freer than Malaysia will not elicit as many emotions as you're saying that Singapore food is better than Malaysian food. So that's one thing.
Okay, well, I'm. This is one extremely controversial topic that I will not voice any opinions on,
Wow,
because
we finally got you to like
it would land me in trouble on both sides of the board, and I don't really want to lose my Singaporean followers as well. No, but I do. All I can say is that I did enjoy street food in Malaysia, so that's good. Malaysia is good on street food.
Wow.
If only it was more popular. If only it was more popular. And by the way, I love nasi lemak, and even in Dubai, I go out of my way to find it, to get my fix. So I like it. I like Malaysian food. I wish it was more popular. Actually, I think it's a bit underrated. And I mentioned it actually, well, pointing out that, well, Malaysians
Yeah, I
brag
saw that.
about their country. They brag about their country, but really, out of all the cuisines,
Mm,
they're the least well known. But I think they deserve a lot more. And I do like the sort of Malaysian food. Actually, I
wow.
think I like it more. I like it more than all the other. I don't, Thai and Vietnamese
Mm,
and others. I think Malaysian food in general, or I would say,
mhm,
how do I put this? The peninsular, so we can include Singapore at the very end as well. The
mhm.
the whole regional food is top notch. So.
Mm,
Uh, so I
wow.
enjoyed it. So no reason to hate me for it, on that point, at least.
You might
I'm
actually end up
I'm
getting like a whole bunch of like
I'm
Malaysian fans because of what you just said there.
Yeah, Malaysia Boleh. Yeah,
Malaysia Boleh. Great.
yeah,
So then, okay. Now to kind of move towards the end of this conversation. So now I want to
sure,
offer a bit of a, shall we say, a counterpoint, another devil's advocate thing, as it were, right
sure.
here. So now you've said that basically Singapore is more free relative to some other places that you might imagine it's not as free as the idealized, shall we say, place with infinite freedom of speech where a person can say
Yeah.
anything right there.
Hmm.
Now, this is not an accusation, but like it is just to highlight a couple of like different facts right over here. So then you do see that, for example, members of the Singapore establishment happen to share your posts.
Yeah.
So then people in parliament defend your right to essentially say what you do say. And that is well, despite the fact that you have people like Kenneth Tiong casually asking if
Oh,
PAP
that
is going
was
to reject the critical Spectator, to which you replied by saying that he is becoming a bigger liability to the party, the Workers' Party, for those of you who are not aware.
there's more coming, trust me.
There is more coming. Okay. So then, what do you say to the assertion that critical spectator thinks that Singapore is free because he has only been lucky enough to not be on the hard end of the ban hammer? You have been favored in some way. Now that's an assertion. Now
Yeah.
you can like choose to deny that, or you can like fight back with the force of a hurricane if you like. But people might
Yeah.
then say that, hey, you just happen to be lucky. You're not on the edge of the banhammer. You are one of the survivors. And we know that survivor bias is a very poor way of looking at the societal trends at large, right there. And as an exception, so you cannot speak for the entirety of Singapore society, which is in fact repressive and authoritarian. How would you respond to that?
Well, I don't know anybody who landed himself in trouble and not really deserve it. So perhaps I would say historically, I think Singapore was more restrictive than it is today.
Mhm.
But I don't see a problem. I don't see any. And by the way, you have to understand the context as well. With yourselves in Malaysia, if, you had the communist insurgency going on for decades.
Mm.
You had the Cold War until the late 80s,
Mm.
early 90s. You had very real threats that had to be controlled in one way or another. And the government has made plenty of effort to ensure that especially communist threat for several decades would not rise, and that unfortunately included clamping down on people who may have been thought to sort of inject dangerous ideologies into Singapore, which, by the way, when you look at the results, it worked and it was the right choice. Singapore is now one of the most successful countries in the world. So there's vindication to that. Now, when it comes to modern day activists, I don't see anybody being censored or otherwise oppressed by the government. Yes, they receive POFMAN notices, but for obviously incorrect and false statements that even I could disprove. And they're not thrown into jail. They're not disenfranchised in any way. We all remember the new narrative controversy when they were denied registration in Singapore. Well, they were denied registration in Singapore because they took a lot of money from foreign sources. And there are many countries in the world who would question it and ask, why is it that you cannot raise enough money from local sources if you want to explicitly be engaged in activism on social political topics? It's not only about writing. Anybody can write. There are opposition pages, there are opposition websites, there's plenty of them on social media. I don't see any of them get banned for railing against the PAP or for even chastising Lee Kuan Yew, unless you do something like Amos Yee, who really, crossed the line. But even he got himself into the medical sort of evaluation, which, as we know, was probably well justified given his later history and
Oh yeah, for sure.
jailings and so so I think the government was onto something. And by the way, nobody got into trouble for supporting him, right? You had the academics who said, yes, Amos Yee was a role model for us, and the government clamped down on him too hard. They didn't get into trouble directly in any way. Nobody, they didn't have police raids or they didn't end up in jail. And by the way, yes, the government will, or not really the government, but the authorities will, in case of a certain controversy that may stir emotions or whatever, visit you. They may even seize your devices and they may check the content. And by the way, when you say I wasn't on the receiving end of that, well, I have to say that I was. I had to go to Singapore police several times because people reported my posts, I had my phone seized for a week. And I had my content checked, so it's not really that I'm sort of protected and nobody's touching me or anything. No, I was making some jokes. The second one was a sort of a double entendre about coronavirus and Quran or whatever it was. It was just and it was a repost I reposted a post from this Imam of Peace. What was his name? The Iranian guy who was popular on social media for a while. So I reposted that post, and I got into trouble for that, for causing enmity. And another one was when I used the phrase, and it was discussing American politics, and I used the phrase "Jesus fucking Christ," and it's an expression. Somebody reported me for that phrase, for wounding the feelings of Christians, because I used Jesus fucking Christ when I was talking about Donald Trump with somebody, right? So authorities are very, very strict, and they will come down on you even if you're considered sort of friendly to the government. So I did, and I had to go to the police. And they saw me again, and I was like, "Oh, what is it now?" And it's like, "Just look at this post." So I had to give a testimony. They took it. I have to give up my phone, and they had to check it. If I didn't post, I don't know what they do with it.
When was it?
If I didn't,
that this happened.
When was it? It was 2019, 2018. It was right after actually. I became quite popular. It was that time, and then several months later, I posted something and. Because obviously, a little bit like with these Malaysian posts now, I got a lot of haters. They reported me just to get me into trouble, and then I had to, answer questions from the SPF. So it's not like that I'm protected by the PAP. No, they have my number. They know they will WhatsApp you. Actually, they WhatsApp me. It's like, come down because there's something's wrong. Yeah. So I had a WhatsApp contact with the police, and it took a few months and before it was cleared.
Wow.
So it's not like that. So it's not at all. Yeah. And the authorities will enforce the laws no matter who you are. There are no sacred cows.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about what you said earlier about activists not getting prosecuted or anything, and the immediate ones I remember are this Monday of Palestine Solidarity. Maybe you remember. That's basically that bunch of girls and people who are going up to Shangam, and then he was picked up, that kind of thing, and there was a whole controversy right there. And I was thinking also about this group right here that got Pofmat. Multiple falsehoods have been communicated on this page, amongst other things.
That's beautiful. Oh, I love it.
Wow. Well, yeah.
This is what I would like to see. I don't want pages taken down and banned, or people thrown in jail. I want that there. Multiple falsehoods have been communicated on this page. Click for more details. And I love this. Click for more details. You don't. It's not just a label. This is why. This is what's wrong with it. They explain it. It's a community note by the government. I love it.
Wow.
Everybody should do it.
That is pretty crazy. The online, you can see that right there. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time so far. And I have one last question for you as we conclude this conversation.
Sure.
So you've become very popular in Singapore. Now, a lot of people follow you, your writings, which are sharp, incisive, and thank you for choosing to raise certain issues, which, a lot of people would not raise. I think that it takes a lot of bravery to be able to do that. And while I will not affirm or deny my agreement or non-agreement with what it is that you have said right there, I appreciate you for being one of those people who is willing to speak his understanding of truth to power. And on that note, how do you feel about building an audience in Malaysia? You could end up getting very popular with people in Malaysia as the result of this whole kerfuffle.
I know it's never really been my ambition to get involved in Malaysian politics. My activity on Malaysia is probably more reactive when I see something. I think it's a little bit through the lens of Singapore, really. So when you see something, when I see something obviously controversial, like with this whole Iran war, or something that affects Singapore directly, then I will usually get involved. But uh, to comment on Malaysian politics, I don't think I have. I mean, I would have a few things to say, but on the other hand, there's really it's it's the same reason why I don't really comment on Polish politics as well.
Mm,
That and the reason I like Singapore is that it's very easy to see who the bad guys are and who the good guys are.
I
This is
see.
not something that you can say about any other country. So getting
Wow.
involved, even throwing what would I write about in Malaysian politics? All of the parties are roughly the same. They have their own sins and they have their own dirty secrets, and they all do things that are kind of questionable. And there's no clear hero in Malaysia. There's nobody who would say, yes, this guy or this party, they talk sense. They should yeah, exactly. They should win it, and they should make Malaysia great finally. But but so there isn't. That's why I don't write about Polish politics as well. You don't have that.
Mm,
I'm interested in I'm interested in countries and in politics and geopolitics that are important globally.
mm,
That's why I write, about Americans. That's why I write about Russian, Ukraine, China, European affairs to the extent that they affect international affairs. But domestic politics, not really. It
mm,
does because most countries are in this state of a mess. You can't really throw your weight behind anybody.
mm.
And who am I to then I'm going to preach about how the country should be run when there's nobody really capable of running it? Not really. In Singapore, it's easy. We know who the good guys are. They have a track record. They keep delivering. The country is rich, safe, clean. It's fantastic. And then we have the wannabes who really want to try to poke the government. It's easy. It's easy to pick them off and defend Singapore, because Singapore is such a small oasis of sanity that it just feels important to defend it for me personally.
Wow.
Um, so I don't like people picking on those who have achieved something. This really infuriates me. So politically, Singapore is such a place, and it's the only place where I could write about, because I said, in UAE, for example, I love UAE as well. It's a great place, and it's a run really, really well. In many ways, it has certain advantages over Singapore. It has certain deficits. The thing is, it doesn't have an active political scene at all, because it's not a democracy. It's a monarchy. It's a federation of 7 emirates with their own rulers. There's nothing to talk about. Either you like it or you leave it.
Mm-hmm.
But in Singapore, well, you have the good government, and then you have wannabes trying to pick
Mm,
at it.
mm,
And it annoys me, because I like Singapore and I would like to settle in Singapore eventually.
mm.
And this is the reason I write in defense of the good guys.
Yeah, I mean, like, thank you. Like, if I settle in Singapore one day, then like maybe we can meet up for coffee or something.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, okay, great. So thank you so much, Michael. It's been an absolute honor, and I appreciate your taking the time. And do you have any like last minute things that you want to say to the world or to the entire population of people out there who are fascinated by your journey, what it is, what it was, and what it may become at some later point in the future?
Well, I don't know if I can promote myself in any way like that. Just my only focus is on the truth. Really, that's why I try to bring to light. And I hate the fact that we are restricted from saying so many things in so many places that
Mm,
I just want to say it. That's what I do, and you judge me by it.
all
Just
right. Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor. And all right. So catch you a little later.
yep. See ya.
Yep.
Thanks
See
very much
ya.
for the conversation.
Of
Bye bye.
course. Likewise.